Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to SF Live. I'm your host, Myrna Lim. Welcome back to the second segment of our interview with economist Brian Browne. So Brian, welcome back. Thank you for staying. And anyway, we are trying to educate ourselves, the public, as to the economy, what's going on with the world today. At least give us a prism as to the order of things, what's happening today, and with hopefully a clear understanding of the infrastructure of the economy, whether or not changes can be made. Hopefully we will make the right decisions coming into this election in 2012, hopefully. And hopefully then also that the public will be able to make some shift, make some changes as to how they live based on how they look at the world and how they adjust to it. So anyway, how about that for a big introduction? And no phones.
No phone. Sorry about the phone.
We killed your phone. So welcome. All right, so now you have, what are you going to talk about? The continuation.
Well, no, I believe the fundamentals of the U.S. economy are fairly good.
Okay, good. Now we're getting to some good news. Okay.
But I also believe in strong private property rights, and that you let people trade, exchange, and produce, and they do it well.
Okay. And
the less they're encumbered with anxiety created by governments, the better, or interference by governments, the better.
Okay.
I'm not saying there is no role for government. There is a role for government, and there's a definite role. And I believe that role goes into making sure people don't fall through the cracks.
Right.
And that's very definitional, I realize.
Right.
But there is a role, so I want to have a dichotomy in your mind and people's mind that I'm not like they say fair economists. No,
yeah.
I mean
you're not advocating a revolution.
I mean when I walk up the street in the morning, I go swimming every morning, and I see people on the street who are not drunks, who are not taking drugs. They just have nowhere to live, and they're coughing and they're sick.
Right.
I mean, that really concerns me, and I see the failure of our economy. They call it market failure. It's often discussed by economists. What causes a market to fail like our economy apparently did?
Right.
Lots of reasons. But I think a lot of it was created by the permissive way our government deregulated and did not go after the crooks who were doing the financial
there's a lot of them in government, unfortunately.
Business. Yeah.
Right.
So I have severe problems with why it happened and what happened and why there was no accountability.
Right.
And if we had had accountability, I believe the system would have rebounded quicker.
Right.
That's in a nutshell what I think. And I have, as I said, I believe we have to get back to that type of model.
Okay, how does the average person get back into that? I mean, here is the problem. I mean, manufacturers are not creating jobs. The stimulus bill, that's $800 billion plus all the top monies, trillions of dollars, have really not created the jobs that were supposed to have been created. We see a lot of jobs being exported overseas. How could a job create it? Because before this major upheaval in the economy, jobs were created by, your basic mom and pop, your basic individual and groups of individuals who have those dreams of entrepreneurship. You have the small businesses who have ideas and set up shops in a corner store. You have people coming up with inventions driven by their creativity and their talent, who want to create something knowing that there'll be buyers for those. So there's that pursuit of the American dream, and there's financing available for that pursuit, and the government has made available help, and businesses had made available those type of help. I remember eons ago, when I was young, I mean, there was a win-win mentality, in businesses, and in business school, there's this win-win situation. you know, in government. It's win-win. You get some, I get some. All right. I mean, it's that was the thinking process, but now it's like one gets everything and nothing. Is a zero-sum game now. How would you change that though? I mean, is there an explanation for that, or is that, you know, how do you?
You know, I have to go back to my core principles that we need strong private property rights.
Right.
We need what Adam Smith called a commercial morality, and by that there has to be some morality in business dealings. There didn't seem to be any morality.
Yeah, there's no ethics anymore.
There was no ethics, and the government didn't seem to pursue it. They basically eliminated regulation, and they eliminated the regulators. They didn't have people there that have one regulator for an entire industry and things like that.
You know, the funny thing was, when I was growing up and in business school, we used to make fun of businesses who, you know, like bring stories home, you know, when they're doing business in China, like the big old McDonald's, where they built this McDonald's somewhere in Beijing, and then they had to demolish it because they bribed the wrong people after spending $1 million building it. To us then, Americans, we think, oh no, that's something that, I mean, of course, America's business at that time was not pure, but there was kind of massive corruption was unheard of, and that wasn't not the kind of way we did business. But now you read the newspapers, it's like, you know, money is going out the door, right? I mean, so has there been that change, that shift in the way people do business? There's no.
You know, I still think America is a great place
Right.
for entrepreneurs. I mean, look where we live. I mean, some of the greatest entrepreneurs in the world have grown up here and
Right.
created their inventions and
Look
made
at
the
Steve
made
Jobs,
the world.
look at Steve Wozniak, you know.
Made the world, Silicon Valley,
Look,
made the world better for,
exactly.
and that still exists. I'm saying the blips or the Great Depressions
Right.
or recessions that we've had have been created in Washington by unexpected change in courses and by allowing
You mean
permissiveness where permissiveness wasn't allowed.
You mean all those Congress people who have a 9% approval rating at this time? You wonder if they're all
I'm not so
fabulous
sure
even.
it's Congress. I think that
It's a combination of.
it's a combination. I'm concerned with the role of the Federal Reserve Bank in our economy,
Right.
what they can do,
Now
and
explain to
what
people
is
what the Federal
transparent.
Reserve Bank is. I mean, is this a government? It's not a government entity, the Federal
No,
Reserve.
it was created in 1913 in response to a major recession in 1907,
Right.
and it was supposed to stabilize the economy, and it's basically stabilize the currency and stabilize full
Right.
employment and things like that. But its role has expanded, and it now gets into all sort of business which it may or may not was originally intended, such as stabilizing other banking systems throughout the world.
Right.
Getting even into our stock market in certain things. I mean, Ron Paul, and I hate to go back that, but we have to listen to who's speaking. We have a major campaign going on,
Right.
which is very interesting to me to hear these philosophies, and without coming down on one side or the other.
Right.
But he wants to see their books. He wants to know what they're doing. It's a private system, private bank. It was a series of private banks,
Yeah.
12 different districts. But it controls our money supply.
Right.
And the question he's saying, it would be better if we took that role away from them and gave it to the Treasury Department, as in the Civil War and things like that. I don't know what the answer is. I certainly have concerns about the Federal Reserve Bank and the power they wield
Right.
over our economy. Because if you control the money supply, you
control the
the
world.
economy. And again, I believe recessions and depressions are made in Washington, D.C. I believe the Fed and the overt spending by the federal government on above and beyond its means
Right.
caused this depression or recession.
Yes, I think so too.
But I think if you give Americans or any people a good chance, especially with the great capital we have in this country.
It's a great country. I mean,
Human
otherwise it will
capital,
not be here.
non-human capital in abundance, above
Right.
all other countries. If you give them a chance by a stable government that doesn't continually subject them to discretionary changes one way and another, but goes
Right.
on a steady path, as I suggested about Milton Friedman, a 3% increase in the money supply, if such was possible, don't change that, we would have great development in this country, great economic surge again, as we've seen in the past and we will have in the future.
Well, okay. What's the characteristic? What sort of, because I think what you're talking about is that would require a real leadership. I mean, it's not going to happen in a vacuum, right? I mean, you have to be able to put ethical, brilliant minds. There's a lot of brilliant minds, but the question is, the bar, of those brilliant minds, that they have to have some kind of moral compass. In that.
That's a very complex question you've asked, but I
we need a psychologist for that, right? But I mean, you're putting a burden on somebody, and in my mind, when you're talking about, a burden to correct what's wrong, I mean, you're asking for leadership. In this case, a global leader who would really think strongly about correcting this path that we have taken, that the government has taken. And,
yes,
I don't mean to put you on the spot on that, but
no, it's a very good question, and you have to come back to your own frame of reference.
Right.
And my frame of reference is working in a bureaucratic environment, as being on the task force for the infrastructure in San Francisco and the Revenue Bond Oversight Committee.
Right.
And I always am amazed at how people that I consider resume misfits rise to the top and run the organization.
They always
do. And that must end. We can't afford that any longer in this great country. We have to get the best people running the country, and I don't know how we do that.
Well, it's tough because, I mean, you have the Supreme Court, making the decision that, corporations are individuals, so they can spend as much money as they want and, need to...
On political campaigns.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
They buy the election. I mean, a wealthy individual, how much can a wealthy individual spend? Whereas you have a corporation, just buy the election.
I don't want to argue too heavily against the market system, but I know where we're going with that. But I think that I heard today President Obama was talking about, and it was the speech I heard just before I came, cutting back on military outlays overseas. He's retracting this. We have to do that. I think the market will force that upon us, and these corrections I hope will be long lasting.
Right.
And I think we will have a balanced budget at some point. I mean, I don't want to see one as a constitutional amendment,
right,
because it concerns me if we suddenly need to expand our debt for emergencies. But I want to see it as a goal, a realistic goal, and we haven't come near that yet.
right.
And we need to stop interfering in the government needs to stop interfering in the transactions.
I know. Whatever
in the commercial transactions of people. We're over-regulated, but we're really under-regulated because there's no oversight that I see.
Right.
In many cases, not in all cases.
Right.
If that makes sense.
No, I understand. So, I mean, basically, you believe in the free market.
Oh, very much so. Yeah.
Right.
But I believe that there must be a net for people.
Yeah, a safety net for people.
Yeah, for certain people.
Right.
But I think that the creativity of people has to be encouraged, just as you were saying. I mean, and a lot of people today will have to look at their skill set and say, look, I ain't producing a widget worth the value and people aren't buying it. I have to do something else. And they'll retrain themselves.
Right.
And again, I think if the top had gone into that activity instead of into the financial intermediaries who rewarded themselves with major bonuses, it was just really sickening to watch that sort of debacle.
Right.
And yet they did it, and they got away with it. And there's no accountability, and there's very little sunshine with what goes on. And that we need accountability and we need transparency, and we don't have it. And if people work toward that, I believe the markets will reinvigorate themselves if we have that, and confidence in that. And that just creates a better platform for strong private property rights, and so people can internalize the benefits of their entrepreneurship.
Well, I guess you are in the Bond Revenue Committee in San Francisco, and you've been fighting with the PUC. Every time we talk about a program, we want to talk about the PUC. The lack of transparency. I mean, talk about it. Let's talk about that.
Well, I mean, I had concerns they weren't getting the job done. That They weren't on time and on schedule. We have a state law that says they must spend 50% of the money by 2010, which is passed, and complete the project by 2015. AB 1823 passed. Well, so on my committee, I finally prevailed upon the members of my working committee to hire UCLA and UC Berkeley, after an exhaustive search of schools, to do a full physical on what the SFPUC was doing. And suddenly, and we negotiated with them. They came in, they brought these brilliant professors in. It was just, and they were talking about looking at the flows in the river, the dam capacities, financial system, rates, the whole 9 yards. They just disappeared. It just disappeared. One day I went to a meeting, and we were no longer talking about this contract, which was just about ready to come into existence and give the voters answers to the two questions we wanted to know. Can they do it on time and on budget? That's what I wanted to know. And now, so that was my one thing. So when I looked at it, I found out that we'd probably spent about $1 billion, issued over $3 billion in revenue bonds. We've got a lot of money in the Treasurer's Department earning 1.25%.
Right.
And we're paying 4.5% on the coupon rate. And that's been capitalized down into the future to be then blended into the rate structure, which is going to mean immense rate hikes in the future when that becomes part of your rates. But, so I've had my speech about the PUC.
Oh, no. Let's talk about, because in the coming election, November, I believe the state is looking at issuing bonds.
Water bonds. 17 billion.
How many?
17 billion, I think.
70 billion. So
17.
So talk about it. Please do.
Well, I can only talk about I don't know whether the state will do a better job or a worse job. I mean, I know that the job that I'm looking at right now, I'm dissatisfied with, very dissatisfied.
Okay.
And I'm very dissatisfied with the fact that my committee, actually, the chairman of my committee wrote a rebuttal to one of my articles in the West Side Observer at the request of the PUC, SFPUC, and they wrote a lot of it. And when the editor...
Wait. Your own committee?
The chairman of my own committee.
You are the oversight committee.
Well, I'm on the independent revenue bond oversight committee.
Are you like commissioners?
No,
you're citizen. You're a citizen committee.
Yeah, it was formed in. Well, we got a lot of power. We could pull the right to fund.
Do you really? Okay, well,
but we would never use it. I can tell.
You're a citizen committee, and your job is
to look at how they spend revenue bonds.
Okay,
do they do it effectively, and so forth and so on. Yeah.
And so far you have not been.
I just told you I was concerned that there was very little progress, and I prevailed upon two members of my subcommittee to hire UCLA and UC Berkeley, mainly UC Berkeley. They had eminent professors, they had students coming in to do PhDs. It was an incredible program. And then it disappeared. That contract just disappeared at the committee meetings, and the subcommittee I was on disappeared, and a new subcommittee started. And then I wrote about it in a newspaper article, and then under Sunshine, I learned that the PUC had asked the chair of my independent committee to write a rebuttal to me, which was done, and they helped with the rebuttal. Now, how that help, quote unquote, got blended into the rate structure concerns me. But, I'm termed out, and I'm glad to probably be that way, to be honest with you.
Well,
I would like to write a tome on the need for oversight in the financial market. I am looking at doing that in the quieter moments of my life. And it is required. We do need real oversight in this world, because firms.
That's why we have you in this show, Brian. I mean, from real life experience. I mean, because you're talking about a direct experience in San Francisco, right? And the fact that there's this big pot of money that has been entrusted by the citizens of San Francisco.
It's immense. And now the city is apparently going to financing a lot of the projects using revenue bonds, which means they're kicking the can down into the future for payment.
With the money.
Yeah. So, and I think we do need oversight, and we need it to be transparent, and we need to, but we meet in the PUC, surrounded by PUC staff. We're supposed to be on television before at the Board of Supervisors. I mean, I'd love to be heard debating, but I'm not.
Well, I mean, so basically, this, I guess, is a major change. This is the kind of change that the public can make, can engage in, so that the kind of power that we can take back.
Yes, I know you've got short on time. I need to say this. My committee is trying to extend their longevity. They sunset at the end of this year.
Right.
They sunset. But the board can extend their life if it so chooses. And they're pushing the board to do that. I think that would be terrible. I think it would be a major mistake.
Sunshine, that's the answer.
We need oversight, but not this type of oversight, because it's an illusion and it's worse than having any oversight.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, after 2 hours, I think we came up with one answer, with one solution: oversight, transparency. And when we hold our own government accountable, then that will be a good first step. It will not be a cure-all, but certainly it's a good first step. Thank you so much for joining us, and good night.